when we do not forgive, we're really choosing to suffer ourselves, because we're the ones that are holding on to the anger, to the pain, to the feelings of revenge that cause us difficulty. It's not the other person. The other person really doesn't have to change. The purpose of forgiveness isn't to change the other person. That other person may never change. And the ego always has a form for forgiveness, that people have to come and be this way. Or that means that you need that you don't put boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't mean you don't put boundaries in around you. And I like to share just briefly a sister, Abigail, and that's a woman named Zelinda, who wrote us a letter 12 years ago maybe, and her 19-year-old son had been murdered. And they found the culprit, and he was an alcoholic. He only got second-degree murder. But every year, Zelinda and her family and the residences around there would come to say this person should never be released, that what he did was unforgivable. Now, after about 10 years of this, Zelinda noticed that her hair was falling out. She had gallbladder problems, dermatitis, and a lot of other medical problems. And she recognized that for the first time that her purpose in life was what? Revenge. Getting even. Punishing. But it was having a toll, because those toxic thoughts were playing a part in her illnesses. And she wrote Diane and I a letter. You want to share about that?
There you go.
Saying that she'd like to start a center at this prison, and that she was in the process at that point of helping this man get out of jail. She had some guidance. She became a student of the Course in Miracles and read some of our books. And her guidance was to have peace of mind as her only goal. Peace of God is her only, and listen to that inner voice of Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit told her to go see the prisoner. Well, she didn't want to see him. She wanted to kill him. But she went to the prison and shared her anger, but kept seeing him every week. 3 months later, saw his parents and saw how devastated they were, and saw that she was not alone. And maybe a year later, she began for the first time seeing some positive attributes in this young man, and later on was making efforts to get him out of prison. Well, this is such a remarkable story, as Abigail's was. I had to see her in person. So a week later, I was at the Idaho State Prison seeing this man who was in prison, and Zelinda, and they were holding hands with tears coming down their face, but no animosity, no anger. It was a very remarkable experience. And that night I was having dinner with Zelinda and an oncologist, and the oncologist said, but Zelinda is a very exceptional person. And I said, oh no, she's a very ordinary person. What she did was exceptional. Which meant that we all might be able to do that. And so coming back on the plane to San Francisco, I was asking myself, well, Zelinda can forgive someone who killed her son. Who is it I haven't forgiven? And what popped up for me was my older brother, who's an ophthalmologist, who at that point in time really didn't approve of the books I was writing or the work that Diane and I were doing. He was always very critical, and we had kind of a tense kind of relationship. So I began thinking about that on the plane and having a willingness to let go, and all of a sudden it just felt like that whole past disappeared from my brother and I. And I began to have tears down my eyes of relief and release. And I saw my brother that night, and I wanted him to feel my difference, and told him the story about Zelinda. And he looked at me and said, Jerry, I can see that you're different, but I haven't changed my opinion about you at all. And that was okay, because the purpose of forgiveness wasn't to change my brother. It was to let go of the stuff that I had inside. Now, it so happened about a year later, that all got transformed too, and we have a very close relationship.
So I just want to maybe emphasize a few points, Jerry, that you made, and highlight them and maybe clarify them. The one is that what we're saying is that the way that we're looking at forgiveness is that forgiveness doesn't have any external script for it, so that it's something that happens inside of us. inside of us so that then we can come to the place of saying, what do I need to think and say and do about this situation? So in the case of people will often say, I mean, my area of specialization has been domestic violence in my psychology career, and people will say, well, what does that mean? Does that mean you just go back and you let somebody beat you up again? We said it's just the opposite of that. The opposite is that, again, there is no form of what you do. It's the clarifying and the strengthening of your internal self. And then you ask for guidance to what do I need to think and say and do about this situation. And it could mean saying no. It could mean saying stop. It could mean saying this needs to change here. It could be whatever it is that comes to you. Not that someone else tells you what to do, that you figure it out. But that's staying in a relationship where one continues to be abused, because we often think of forgiveness as, oh, well, I'm just going to forgive the person and then let them do it again. You know, that's not love, that's pathology. You know, unconditional love does not mean supporting another person's insane behavior. It means being very clear about having peace of mind as your only goal, which means a harmony in what you think and say and do is how we define peace of mind.
So another way of looking at that is to say this, that a peace of mind is our goal. And our ego says, well, I'm not going to forgive until that person apologizes or accepts responsibility of what he did to hurt me. And that person refuses to do that. We give that power to that person to decide whether we're happy or not. And our premise is that we're responsible for our own happiness.
Our own healing.
And it's time that we stop blaming other people for our unhappiness. Doesn't mean they're not responsible for what they did.
It doesn't mean we won't hold them responsible for it.
It doesn't mean there shouldn't be your own internal. And it doesn't mean there shouldn't be justice around that.
Absolutely.
But it means if we want to be free, we have to let go of that form. For example, we were asked to come to Bosnia 2 years ago to work with spiritual leaders and religious leaders who had the feeling that political leaders were never going to resolve the problems in Bosnia. And they were willing to come together. And these are people who had had their churches destroyed, who had seen
their
atrocities.
Synagogues, their mosques were all destroyed.
Each of them had witnessed atrocities from the other side. The Serbs, the Muslims, the Croatians, they all had seen terrible, terrible things. But as they came together, they started getting fearful. And all of a sudden, their form of forgiveness was, well, if the other person takes responsibility and apologizes first, then maybe I will then apologize for things that our side did.
Right, or that I'll forgive the person, right. Yeah. And so the whole center of that conference, it was the first of its kind after 8 years in the war. We have a large center for attitudinal healing in Croatia. It goes all along the Dalmatian coast with many satellites. And so then we began working in Bosnia. And this conference was, again, the first of its kind. It was interesting. It was formed just like this room, three-sided. And we had the Serbian Orthodox priests and bishops, the Catholic priests and bishops, and the Muslim imam.
Do you remember the Serbian priest, what he said, that young man?
Oh, yeah. There was a Serbian Orthodox priest in the group, a young man, who shared the story about how 8 members of his family, all 4 of his siblings, his parents and his grandparents, had been herded into a house. And the house had been torched, and they all had been murdered. And he helplessly could do nothing about it. And he said he knew at that moment in time that he was going to have to make a choice. That once he went through all of the grief, etc., he was going to have to make a choice of either being just like the people that did it and going after them for revenge for the rest of his life, or he was going to have to forgive. And obviously the path he took was forgiveness. But it doesn't mean, again, that people are not held responsible for what they do. That's a choice that each of us makes. The idea of this, looking at forgiveness in this way, is that it's all an internal process that helps set us free to make choices that are clearer about what we need to think and say and do. And often it will be, take this person to court, bring this person to justice, whatever that is. And the internal process looks something like this. Maybe I'll just draw a little picture of it. And that, if you can imagine an image in your mind, you know, when you think of real estate or a property that you buy, you know, your brain is like real estate. Your brain is like property. And there's different portions of it. And one portion of it is where we hold our grievances, okay? We hold on to our unforgiving thoughts because if you got amnesia today, or if I gave you an amnesia shot, a shot that makes you forget everything, what would happen to all of your grievances? You would forget them, and they wouldn't exist any longer. Okay? So I'm just saying that there's a place in you, inside of you, where the grievances live. They don't live outside of you. You're not a victim of your grievances. You are your grievances. So if you think of it for a moment, a picture of this part of your brain that holds the grievances. In order to keep a grievance going, or to keep an unforgiving thought going, you have to take up space in your brain, which otherwise would be used for creativity, love, productivity, artistic expression, whatever it is, right? So you take up real estate. And in order to keep someone alive, say you're the person, you know, that I'm upset with, I have to keep you in my head, right? Because if you weren't in my head, what would happen? I'd forget you, right? I need to keep you alive. So every day I have to keep, it's like building a jail in my head. I put you in the jail. And what happens when you build a jail? You put someone in it, you have to stand guard, right? So I have to use my consciousness to keep this grievance. This is every little petty thought we have, mind you. Okay? I have to keep it alive. And in order to keep you alive inside the jail so you don't die, I have to keep feeding you. I have to keep feeding this grievance. So I get people to agree with me, and every day I keep remembering it, or every couple of days. And I stand guard. So who's in jail? Half the time the other people don't even know it, that you're upset with them, or they're dead, or they're whatever, or maybe they do know, but meanwhile you're the one that's suffering. So at a purely selfish level, not even a spiritual level, a selfish level, when you let this person out of jail to face their responsibility in the world, it sets you free, and your creative space comes back to being your space. Then you can say, what do I need to think and say and do about this experience, and go and take action. Forgiveness is the way that we set ourselves free.